The Falsehood of Truth. In these sessions, we've talked about change and where at times we may sit at opposite sides of the table in what we want individually in our relationship. We've discussed ways on how to handle and resolve those challenges. We've also talked about what we can do to allow our partners a win, because when our partners feel that there's an opportunity to succeed with us, to make us happy, they lean in and they want to give back. They want to return that olive branch, the trust and understanding offered to them. Connection is the result of that understanding, a dance of openness and empathy between each other. You might notice then that both of these session topics, meeting in the middle between our individual desires, are really about creating relational connection. Instead of his side and her side, it's finding the team effort of our side. To understand this further, we should talk about what creates that chasm, and it's subjectivity. Because ultimately, truth is slippery when it comes to relationships. As individuals, we live our lives through our eyes. This is the way we go about our lives most of the time. Whenever conflict happens, our egos are convinced that we are right and they are wrong. And yet, what you believe about anything has been created and colored by your past, your experiences, and your expectations. Your belief will dictate how you translate a particular situation and how you will react to it. And the same thing goes for our partners. On top of all of this, especially for men, their egos tell them that all that action and reaction are objective, are linear. I do this action to produce this reaction. And it's her fault if she doesn't react the way I expect her to. You see this all the time. In one couple's session, I actually heard the following. Well, she wanted us to spend more time together, so I set up a dinner for us, and she wasn't happy. The food was terrible, and I feel like I wasted $200 on nothing. When she said it wasn't quite the date that she was expecting, he felt frustrated. He didn't feel like he could do anything right. Because of how he felt, then, he shut down and closed off from her, which made the entire situation worse. Here is the ego at play. I did what I thought was right, and it didn't work. And if I were right, she must be wrong. I guessed that what he had missed was her subjective viewpoint, her subjective experience. Indeed, he had planned a dinner out, and in his mind, he felt he was giving her a break on cooking. And more on that expectation later, by the way. And he was giving her the quality time she desired. They did have dinner together and sat side by side at the bar side of the restaurant. Above their heads, the game was on, and his phone dinged with texts from work from time to time. And then, when the TV was on commercial and his phone paused with its interruptions, he remarked on a frustrating situation at work and a problem that he was having with one of his colleagues. She looked at him. She enjoyed the lively environment and was in fact a huge football fan. But this wasn't what she had in mind for reconnecting with each other. It wasn't a communication issue, although it might appear so on the surface. It was that the experience of the date and the view of it was different for each other. It wasn't relational. The underlying reason of conflict isn't tone, body language, or even specific words. It's interpretation. The action-reaction doesn't make sense to your subjective viewpoint, and it sets off the cascade. Your brain then releases cortisol, and you say, I'm ready for battle, fight, or I'm leaving, flight. Neither response helps, and we tend to these extremes because whether we admit to it or not, conflict is scary for most people. It is adversarial and sparks an instinctive feeling of being either abandoned or attacked. So, instead of digging his heels in on being right and ignoring the nature of the subjective experience, he could have asked her on the ride home, what was your experience with our dinner? And after hearing the different experience and expectation that she had had, he could follow with, I'm sorry it wasn't what you expected. What can I do to help you feel better right now? Often, fights spiral because people believe that they can only win or lose, and nobody wants the latter. Instead, the above brings in relational understanding and compromise to bridge the gap between our subjective experiences. Most arguments never leave the sandbox, wanting attention, wanting affection, not sharing. Instead, acknowledge that you can both hold different true perspectives. In that way, you're validating and stopping the lobbying effort to control the other. It also does what nobody really wants to do, and that is to take the first step. It is front-loading your intent to problem solve, because unresolved conflict doesn't go away. It sits, it festers, and it eventually comes out in the next argument, seemingly unrelated. At the root of relationships is our desire to be heard, ours and our partners. To be understood is perhaps the most powerful thing in life. And ultimately, you want to ask, what is the goal? We can be right, or we can be happy. And if you decide to prioritize your connection with your partner and strengthen the relationship, you redefined winning and losing.